Your refrigerator is running right now. It has been running since the day you plugged it in. Every hour of every day, whether you are awake or asleep, in January when you do not need it, and in August when you cannot live without it, the compressor cycles, the motor hums, the electricity meter turns. You pay for it without thinking about it, because you have never once in your life had to think about it. It is just there. The way the lights are, just there. The way the water is, just there. Until the power goes out for 3 days in a summer storm, and every piece of meat in that refrigerator goes bad, and you stand in your kitchen with the trash bag in each hand, throwing out $200 worth of food, and you think, for maybe the first time, what exactly is it I am paying for here? What do I actually own in this arrangement? The average American household spends somewhere between $80 and $150 a month just on the electricity to run refrigeration. Over a year, that is $1,000 or more. Over the 40 years most people own a house, that is somewhere between $40,000 and $60,000 spent on keeping food cold. And at the end of those 40 years, you own nothing. The machine is worn out, the money is gone. And if the grid goes down, your food goes bad by tomorrow morning. Now I want you to sit with something. There is a room underneath this farmhouse. My grandfather dug it by hand in 1931. It is not large, perhaps 12 feet by 14 feet, lined with clay and stone, with a simple wooden door set into the hillside and 2 short pipes running up through the ceiling to the outside air. It holds a steady 52 degrees every single day of the year. In January, when the temperature outside is 8 degrees, the cellar is 52 degrees. In August, when the sun is baking the valley at 96 degrees and the air itself feels like the inside of a bread oven, the cellar is 52 degrees. The apples we put in there last October are still firm and good to eat right now. The carrots are crisp enough to snap. The potatoes have not gone soft. The turnips, the beets, the cabbages wrapped in paper, all of them still good, still healthy food, still feeding this family. And not 1 cent of electricity has been spent to keep any of them. My name is Silas Miller. I am Amish, and I farm this land in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. My grandfather built this root cellar the same year he built the barn. He considered them equally essential, one for the animals, one for the harvest. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly what a root cellar is, how the earth does the cooling, what my grandfather put into this one that most people have never heard explained, and, most importantly, how you can build a working version of it yourself, even in a small suburban yard, even without a hillside or a farmhouse to dig beneath. For around $50 in materials and 1 honest weekend of work. But first, let me explain the science, because once you understand why this works, the rest of the video will make immediate sense to you. The Earth is the world's oldest insulator. Below the frost line, which in most parts of the continental United States sits somewhere between 2 and 4 feet down, the ground temperature does not follow the seasons the way the air above it does. The surface of the earth gets hot in summer and cold in winter. But go down 4 feet, and you have entered a zone that the seasons can barely reach. The ground at that depth averages out the year. It takes all the summer heat and all the winter cold and produces something close to the mean, which in most of the eastern and midwestern United States works out to somewhere between 50 and 58 degrees year-round. The soil acts like a flywheel. It absorbs heat slowly, releases it slowly, and refuses to swing wildly with the weather above. A root cellar is simply a room built below or into the earth, designed to live inside that stable zone. The walls are clay, stone, or earth, materials that conduct heat slowly and store it the same way. The floor is bare earth or gravel, never concrete, which seals the room off from the ground moisture that keeps the air inside from drying out. The ceiling stays low to hold the cool air in, and the whole structure breathes, just barely, through two carefully placed vents, which I will explain in a moment, because those vents are the thing most people get wrong. The result is a room that nature refrigerates for free. Not to 35 degrees the way your kitchen refrigerator does. A root cellar runs warmer than that, typically between 32 and 55 degrees, depending on the depth and the design. But most vegetables, most root crops, most canned and preserved foods do not need to be at 35 degrees to last. They need to be cold and stable and away from light and damp air. The earth provides all four of those things without a single moving part, without a motor, without a bill. My grandfather understood three things about this cellar that I want to tell you about, because they are the difference between a root cellar that works for 100 years and a damp hole that rots everything you put in it. The first is the location. He did not dig it just anywhere. He dug it into the north face of the small hill behind the house, the face that the sun does not reach directly for most of the day and most of the year. A root cellar dug into a south-facing slope absorbs heat all summer from the sun hitting that hillside directly. A north-facing slope stays in shade through the long afternoons. Every degree you do not pick up from the sun is a degree you do not have to lose later. He picked the coldest natural spot on the property before he dug a single shovelful. The second thing is the vents, and this is the part almost every homemade root cellar gets wrong. My grandfather put in two pipes, not one, two. One pipe comes out low on the wall, and one comes out near the peak of the ceiling. He capped both with fine mesh to keep the animals out, and put a simple wooden slider on each one that he could open or close by hand. The reason for two is air exchange. A single vent lets you get a little air movement. Two vents, placed at different heights, give you something far more useful: control. In summer, he kept both closed through the day, and opened both briefly on cool nights to let the night air in and flush any warmth that had crept in during the day. In autumn, when the outside temperature dropped below the cellar temperature for the first time, he opened them wide and let the cellar cool as deep as he could push it before winter. In winter, if a hard freeze was coming, down below 25 or 30 degrees, he closed them to keep that stored cold from turning into a damaging freeze on his root vegetables. He was not just storing food, he was managing a climate. A very small climate with very simple tools. Two wooden sliders on two short pipes. Nothing more. The third thing is the floor, and it is the simplest thing of all. He left it as bare earth with a layer of gravel, not concrete. The bare earth is where a root cellar breathes. The moisture in the soil below wicks up through the gravel and maintains the humidity in the room, naturally, without a humidifier, without a water source. Root vegetables need humidity to stay crisp. In a dry room, a carrot shrivels in 2 weeks. In a root cellar with a bare earth floor, that same carrot stays firm and crisp for months. Concrete seals that moisture out. My grandfather knew this the way a farmer knows which way water runs, not from a book, but from watching things fail and watching things work over many years. Now let me tell you what you can store in a root cellar and for how long, because the list will surprise people who have only ever thought about cold storage in terms of what fits on a refrigerator shelf. Apples keep for 4 to 6 months in a root cellar, depending on the variety. Late-season varieties, the ones harvested in October, are the best keepers. Wrap each one loosely in newspaper and keep them from touching each other. A single bad apple will spread rot to its neighbors quickly, but a well-wrapped one holds on for months. Carrots last 5 to 6 months packed in slightly damp sand, which keeps them from drying out. Potatoes store beautifully, 6 to 8 months in the dark, loosely piled, not touching the walls. Light makes potatoes green and slightly bitter, so darkness is essential. Cabbage will keep 2 to 3 months with the outer leaves left on. It smells as it ages, so if your cellar connects directly to the house, keep the cabbage in a covered box. Turnips, beets, parsnips, celeriac, all of them 4 to 6 months in damp sand or in the root cellar air. Winter squash stores differently. It actually prefers a warmer, drier environment, around 50 to 55 degrees with low humidity, which the cellar can provide if you manage the vents to keep the air a little drier. Onions and garlic want it dry and cool. Hang them in mesh bags from the ceiling, not on the floor where the humidity is higher. Canned goods, jars of preserved food, pickles, jams, fermented vegetables, last a year or more in the stable cool of a root cellar, away from the light and temperature swings that degrade them over time on a pantry shelf. That is an entire year of food for a family, grown and preserved and stored without a single watt of electricity. Now I owe you the honest limits because I will not have you build this and then feel I misled you. A root cellar is not a refrigerator. It does not get down to 35 degrees on a hot August day in Georgia or Texas. In the deep South, where the ground itself is warmer, a traditional in-ground root cellar will run warmer than it does here in Pennsylvania. It will still be cooler than your kitchen, and it will still extend the life of your produce significantly. But the temperatures I'm describing, 50 to 55 degrees in summer, are for the upper Midwest, New England, and Mid-Atlantic states. The further south you go, the more you need to design your cellar deeper and with more shade. A root cellar does not preserve everything. Meat and dairy need to be below 40 degrees to be truly safe for long-term storage. Your root cellar handles the harvest, the roots, the hard vegetables, the preserved and fermented foods. For meat and dairy in the summer months, the cellar supplements your refrigerator. It does not replace it entirely. And a root cellar requires management. You need to check on it. You need to pull out anything that has gone soft or begun to mold before it spreads to its neighbors. You need to open and close those vents with the season and the weather. This is not a set-and-forget appliance. It is a living room that you tend, the same way you tend a garden. The families that get the most from a root cellar are the ones who visit it regularly, not just to take food out, but to look, to smell, to notice what is happening in there. My wife goes in twice a week through the winter. She can tell by the smell and the look of the air whether the humidity is right and whether anything needs to come out. Now, for the people watching this who do not have a hillside to dig into, or a farmhouse basement to extend, or a large yard, I hear you. And I want to give you the method that works without any of those things. A buried garbage can cellar. This is the simplest form of the same principle, and it works well for a family that wants to store a limited but meaningful amount of food. You take a large galvanized steel garbage can, the 30 or 32-gallon size, and you bury it in the ground at an angle with the lid just above the surface. You dig the hole at least 3 feet deep, ideally 4. You line the bottom with a few inches of gravel for drainage. You set the can in at a slight angle, not straight up and down, so that when you open the lid in winter and snow or rain might fall in, the water runs off to the side rather than pooling inside. You pack the soil firmly around the outside. You put a layer of straw bales or an old blanket over the lid in the coldest weeks of winter to keep a hard freeze from pushing through. That buried can will hold a steady temperature very close to your local ground temperature year-round. In Lancaster County, that is about 54 degrees. You can pack it with carrots in damp sand, with apples wrapped in newspaper, with potatoes in the dark, with beets and turnips, and pull from it all winter long. The whole project, including the can, costs around $50 at the hardware store. It takes an afternoon to dig and set. It asks no electricity, no motor, no monthly fee. And it works on the same physics as the cellar my grandfather dug by hand 94 years ago. If you have more space and ambition, a small above-ground insulated shed dug partially into a north-facing slope, or even a cold corner of an unheated garage fitted with an insulated box and ventilation, will outperform the garbage can and serve you for decades. Now I want to take a moment, because this is the part that matters most, and it is bigger than cold storage. Think about what we have just walked through. The Earth holds a stable temperature below 4 feet. This is not new information. This is not a discovery. Benjamin Franklin wrote about it. Thomas Jefferson had a root cellar at Monticello. Every farm in this county had one before 1950. The knowledge existed, was practiced, was passed down, and then, in about one generation, from roughly 1945 to 1970, it was replaced entirely by the electric refrigerator. That replacement was not inevitable. It was sold. The refrigerator was marketed as a liberation from the hard work of canning, from the smell of the root cellar, from the old way that reminded people of scarcity. And in some real sense, it was a liberation. I will not pretend otherwise. A refrigerator is a fine piece of engineering, and I do not think less of anyone for using one. But something was lost in the transaction. Because when you gave up the root cellar, you gave up something no appliance salesman told you about at the time. You gave up your independence from the grid. You gave up your food security in a power outage. You gave up the ability to store an entire harvest without cost and without electricity and without a machine that can break and that you cannot fix yourself. You did not lose those things because you were foolish. You lost them because nobody told you what you were trading away, and because the company selling you the new thing had every reason to talk about what you were gaining, and no reason at all to tell you what you were losing. The root cellar did not disappear because it stopped working. It works exactly as well as it ever did. The earth under your feet is still 54 degrees at 4 feet down. The physics have not changed. What changed is that there was no money in the root cellar. Nobody could sell you a monthly subscription to the north face of a hillside. Nobody could charge you a service contract to maintain a room made of clay and gravel. Nobody could make you dependent on them by teaching you to use something your grandfather built with a shovel and his own 2 hands. My grandfather did not call this knowledge a secret. He would have been puzzled by the word. He called it farming. He called it sense. He called it not wasting money on a machine when the earth would do the job for free. The earth is still offering to do the job for free. It has been offering the whole time. So here is what I want you to do this week. Walk your property and look for the north face, the side of your yard or your garage or your house that gets the least direct sun, especially in the afternoon. That is where you start. If you have even a small slope or a raised bed to dig into, that is your location. If you have a flat yard, the garbage can method is your starting point. A $50 investment and one weekend afternoon. Pick up a large galvanized steel garbage can. Dig your hole 4 feet down. Line the bottom with gravel. Pack the can in at a slight angle. Straw over the lid in winter. That is the whole build. Pack it with carrots in damp sand this fall. Pack it with apples wrapped in newspaper. Come back in February and pull out a handful of carrots that are just as crisp as the day you put them in. That is the moment. That is when 200 years of quiet knowledge stops being a story and becomes something you own. And then tell me in the comments below, do you already have a root cellar? Is there one buried under your old farmhouse that you have never used? Or are you starting from nothing? Tell me what your ground temperature is, what part of the country you are in, and what you most want to store. I read every single comment, and the answers you leave teach the next person something I never could. Next time, since we've been talking about storing the harvest, I'm going to show you the way my wife preserves food without canning and without freezing. The old fermentation methods that need no heat, no jars, no processing, and that actually make the food more nutritious with every week that passes. Sauerkraut, fermented beets, preserved cucumbers. The same food that kept Amish families through the winters here for 2 centuries. It is the natural companion to this video, and you will not want to miss it. Until then, walk your property, find the north face, dig your hole, and remember, the people who built this country with their hands knew things we are only just starting to remember.